Aku rindu Labuan Bajo.
There is a critical disconnect between capital and impact in Asia. And what we find is that the holders of capital want to deploy it more effectively to achieve positive social and environmental outcomes. However, the knowledge, the networks, and the communities amongst these holders of capital, particularly the future impact leaders, are nascent and underdeveloped. So keeping all of that in mind, we decided to launch the AVPN Academy.
The Academy is for anyone looking to increase their experience and knowledge of social impact, whether you're just starting out or if you're an experienced professional in the space and want to expand your repertoire and build new skills. The topics we cover will respond to the needs of the ecosystem. They will span the gamut of social investment approaches, from philanthropy, impact investing, to social finance, corporate social impact, and others.
There is no other cross-cutting platform that is focused solely on Asia, with content provided by practitioners for other practitioners to learn from each other.
We're really excited to jointly develop the Social Finance Center. We believe that social finance, blended finance, and results-based financing are some of the key drivers to help us all reach the Sustainable Development Goals.
Now, there isn't always an opportunity within a hectic day to set aside time for learning. So the Academy will offer a range of self-paced modules that you can pick up and complete at your leisure. There will also be a range of resources on our library so that you can dig into a topic at depth. You may also join one of our live virtual classes for interaction, engagement, and potentially collaboration around a new approach or way of thinking.
There is a need for training in this discipline, especially as the field becomes more and more strategic. But we all need to start somewhere. So while many people across the region have passion and desire, they all lack some knowledge of what a CSO role should cover. This center is set up to support you.
So when the opportunity to join a fellowship program coming from as credible network as AVPN came along, it was frankly a no-brainer. Not only will I be getting exposed to a sound and practical understanding of the world of impact investing, but also get connected with a community of practitioners across multiple organizations in Asia who would help challenge and help me grow beyond the fellowship itself.
You know, I was just thinking to myself, wow, if only I had this at the time when I stepped out from my previous roles in the group to take on this at that time called CSR role. And, you know, there wasn't a lot of frameworks, methodologies, and I must say, you know, in some regards, we were muddling our way through.
The best lesson that I learned during the program is actually how to become a data-driven fund manager and investor by leveraging different tools for risk assessment and also for the impact management.
I'm incredibly excited about the Academy. In the short period of time that it has existed, we've actually created a community of like-minded individuals that I think will actually support each other and share with the wider ecosystem in Asia their learnings as they embark on this exciting journey to move capital towards impact.
The AVPN philanthropic funds are very important to the community, to both the funders as well as the grantees, because we are facing an unprecedented crisis in Asia. There's a need to deploy funding fast, but the question is to whom and how can we amplify the impact of our work?
You often see emergency responses, taking away a lot of bandwidth from people who should be focused on the response just because the help that arrives is so splintered, often very duplicative.
The lack of proper infection prevention and control practices and preparedness, which, as we have all come to realize, is crucial for protecting our communities. In particular, smaller and remote health facilities struggle the most in this aspect due to the limited availability of resources.
We are very happy to be able to bring together 6 funders to support solutions pertaining to healthcare needs, as well as COVID response and resilience in 4 Southeast Asia countries: Thailand, Philippines, Malaysia, and Indonesia.
So by having different funders come together for the pooled fund, it allows us to work together and to break down silos, and we are seeing really different types of profiles of funders coming together. Organizations do not have to start from scratch, and more importantly, it's a learning journey for everyone.
The more you work in philanthropy, the more you recognise and value the lens that other kind of funders have and how they look at the same situation and the same grantee and the same kind of broader challenge in particular kind of context. And that learning is priceless.
Personally, I just think it's a really interesting way to engage. And so often we are operating a little bit insularly, in our own organisations, and you're trying to get things done, and caught up often in your own activity. And it's really great to have the opportunity to just step back and hear from others about what they're doing. To, as I say, kind of benchmark yourself informally against where you're up to. If we take this fund that we're a part of, as an example, we can kind of apply it. We can take some of the lessons from that and apply it to other philanthropy.
Understanding that providing unrestricted funding is very important, not just for the grantee organizations, but it's very important for the funding community to consider a different model of working that can amplify their impact, to recognize that together, once we understand that we are moving beyond projects, we are really supporting these organizations to be more resilient. If we invest in such a model, it will help us to build the ecosystem faster, we will make it stronger, and together we will be able to create more impact, and we are able to truly mobilize capital towards impact.
With the additional funding from AVPN's philanthropic pool fund, ISE will be able to maintain and strengthen our primary healthcare systems to mitigate the effect of COVID-19 on the treatment of other diseases, as well as effectively respond on COVID-19 pandemic through infection prevention and control in refugee camps.
We try to have grantees at the forefront and grantee kind of well-being and enabling them to do their job better. And collaborative philanthropy facilitates that if it's done well, because it reduces the burden on grantees to host multiple applications to multiple partners to have one kind of more streamlined reporting mechanism.
The grant will add fuel to the already established PAC transformation program in West Java. The target is to achieve a transformed and strengthened health system that is feasible, cost-effective, equitable, culturally appropriate, and correspond to the community needs.
This is only the beginning for the AVPN philanthropic funds. We need to be able to gather more support, to have more funding to support the impact organizations doing very great work on the ground.
Welcome to Likupang, a place where the ocean embraces you with the bluish of the water and the whispering of the white sand far as the eyes can see. Lying in about 48 kilometers off northeastern of Minahasa, Likupang Beach is full of white sands, surrounded with beautiful green hills, waiting for us to explore it. Enjoy the beautiful underwater park. You're welcome to explore every corner of it. Feel the sensation, the freedom of diving through thousands of fish and coral.
Welcome, everyone. We'll be getting started very, very shortly, so kindly take your seats. We have a very exciting morning program, and I would like to start off by welcoming you all to the second AVPN Global Conference. And in that, I would also like to present that the next performance, can you hear me? Yes? Okay, let's start again. The next performance is by the Bhakti Budaya Jarum Foundation, and it's a performing arts showcase presented by them. I hope you'll be inspired and excited. I've seen them rehearse, and I'm so looking forward to sharing that, that show with you. So thank you very much.
kencang prakencang warudayang ditegor wong ing uni caritane Marcapada lan Kayangan padha memungsuhan ya kuwi sawijining kraton bangsa raseksa giling wesi arane kang ratu juluk Prabu Naga Pracana pasurane mrengut atine kuwur awit datanpa karma katresnaning Sang Prabu agawe sengsematine nanging amung bisa ana ing angen-angen awit mekal sedyane bakal kelakon.
Rungkat timpul tumuju oneng Kayangan. Boyongi Dewi Suprabo kekandilan ing atiku kang denok diplok. Budal.
Sabanjure budal prajurit raseksa tatak tanggon atine Sang Prabu. Boyong kanthi peksa Sang Benari ora masalah.
Prajurit raseksa yen sira kabeh ora gelem tumurun ana ing Marcapada bakal gak sirnakake.
Ora iso. Gusti Prabu Naga Pracana akan turisi. Ini akan jadi akhir dari kalian.
Kalian tak akan berhasil. Tundone Kayangan malah bujang ganjing. Tundone Kayangan asor yudane melawan prajurit raseksa. Ini akhir dari Kayangan. Ojo kleru. Dewa wis paring rawuh. Kabeh wis dadi kodrat Jawata. Ing besok tumit lair dadi jagoning para dewa. Brasta angkara murka. Monang jagat kang inodrat memayu ayuning bawana.
Ada seorang jagoan dewa dan akan dilakukan misi
dan para lingkungan tetap maju.
What a start to the second day of the AVPN Global Conference. I must say, I'm a little bit scared here, but we're all on the same side, right? It's been a fantastic couple of minutes. I must say, I'm out of breath. I nearly fell up the stairs coming up on stage. I think I had so many emotions watching this performance. And let me do a little short introduction. So this is Gato Gacha, and this is a performing arts showcase showing the Indonesian superhero. So the wonderful thing, this is a collaboration between two cultures. And we've heard a lot about the word collaboration already in the first day, and it'll continue in the next days of the conference. So this is a collaboration and a blend of Javanese and Balinese culture with a modern touch. I'd like to introduce that this is presented by the Bhakti Budaya Jarum Foundation, and they are here in the room today. And this is one of their initiatives, and it's in collaboration with Wayang Barata from Jakarta. They support local artists from Bali, and one of them is the J Court Stage Company. So a round of applause to them as well in this collaboration. So one of the things that they wanted me to share is that this performance and this range of emotions, if you would like to continue it, they invite you to join them for lunch at the exhibition hall today. And there they will continue to showcase a number of their other programs, but they are linked around arts, culture, and creativity for sustainable development. So do join them. They are here. They welcome you. Thank you so much. Thank you. So right now, they're going to be setting up a little bit behind me. So bear with me as I continue to highlight what we have witnessed and felt. I am still recovering from all the emotions of the performance. But this is really, truly a story about inspiration, innovation, and our fighting spirit. It is the trial and tribulations of a superhero. In the last 2 years, I'm sure that you have had a number of learnings and as many moments where you have had to dig deep. Dig deep, very deep, to find that inspiration and innovation to work in the fields you do. I'm sure that many can agree that some days were not easy. I will be very transparent. I certainly felt many days were not easy in the last 2 years. The amazing thing is that we all moved forward. We all moved forward, and we are in this room today, gathered together in person. You dug deep and kept your fighting spirit going. In the same spirit of the Indonesian superhero, Gato Gacha, I want to share what I think. I think you are also superheroes, each one of you. Another word that I'd like to lift up this morning is the word grateful. The word grateful has definitely become a bigger part in everyday vocabulary and also actions taken. Grateful for the small and big things, both sizes. So with that, I want us to combine the word superhero and grateful as they wrap up behind me. And if you would bear with me just a few seconds more, and pay attention, because I have a small instruction. So first of all, anyone sitting alone, get a little closer to one another. So do move seats. And turn to your neighbor. Look them in the eyes. Shake their hands if you want to. and say out loud, "Thank you for being a superhero." And then turn to your next neighbor and thank them for being a superhero. So I did also ask another superhero what he would say. And Superman, he says, "I think a hero is an ordinary individual who finds strength to persevere and endure in spite of overwhelming obstacles." So we need all of you superheroes to ensure that we make greater impact in Asia. So I'd like you to give a round of applause for each other. So a short introduction. I am actually, I have realized I haven't introduced myself. I am, in all the talk of superheroes, let me introduce, I am Christina Aman. I am the Vietnam advisor to AVPN, and I will be guiding you superheroes through the agenda this morning. So on to the next part of our agenda. I'm delighted to welcome you all to listen to the catalytic role of philanthropy. So this morning, the speakers will focus on how they are using philanthropic capital to create that transformative social change. And I would like to welcome our speakers and superheroes, Mr. Arshad Rashid, Chairman of the Indonesian Chamber of Commerce and Industry, Ms. Nicola Forrest, co-founder of the Minderoo Foundation, Mr. Rob Hussain, Director, Philanthropic Partnerships, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, Ms. Vidya Shah, Executive Chairperson, Edelgive Foundation, and our moderator, Mr. Chris Addy, partner of the Bridge Span Group. Welcome and thank you.
Well, good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for having us. Nana, when you asked us all to be on this panel, you didn't tell us what we had to follow. We'll do our best, though. So thank you so much. You know, yesterday there was a lot of discussion about the Sustainable Development Goals and what will take to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. I think we heard that there's a tremendous gap from a financing perspective, $4 trillion annually. So if we want to close that gap, what we'll collectively need is for all forms of capital to both increase in quantity and in quality. And philanthropy in particular has a unique role to play, a unique and catalytic role to play. And without the financial requirements of fiduciary capital, without the risk profile of government resources, philanthropy can actually lean into risk, focus on long-term outcomes and objectives, and when done really well, yield transformative change at scale to the other systems and influence the way that that capital flows. So each of our four panelists that you just heard about have a really unique and powerful perspective on this particular topic, on the catalytic role of philanthropy. They've already been introduced. So what we'd like to do today is just have a dynamic conversation between this group and cover a handful of topics, starting with, it would just be great to hear from each of you about how you got into catalytic philanthropy, how you made that shift over time in your giving, if it was indeed a shift, and just a little bit about that story. So maybe, Vidya, if I could ask you to go first.
Sure, thank you. I think, the session brief spoke about catalytic philanthropy, and a lot of us, perhaps, maybe I'm speaking for the others, we didn't realize we were being catalytic till, we started doing a few things, looked around, looked at what other funders were doing, and realized that perhaps we were doing something a little different. And along with your sort of the definition of catalytic, which includes taking risks, looking at advocacy and campaigning, and really a lot of trust building with the grantees, and along with obviously financial capital that goes into grants. I think there are three things that I feel our brand of philanthropy at Edelgive sort of symbolizes. I think we've looked at risk very differently because most philanthropy is very worried about taking risk. We've always spoken about how risk-averse actually philanthropy, that shouldn't be risk-averse, is actually risk-averse. And I think that it's the reason is because we confuse mistake with failure. Failure is a very strong word. And when we look at mistakes, I think our money should enable us to make mistakes such that we don't have catastrophic failures. You make small mistakes and learn along the way. And I think that is one thing we've done, is started with small grants and built it over the long term with grantees so that starts becoming catalytic, because you start with small things and then you build it up. I think we've sort of understood what it is to make mistakes versus failures, which actually basically symbolize unintended negative consequence. And therefore thinking through a grant and being there for the long term along with financial capital makes sense. The second thing is really capacity building, which was not included in the definition. I think building the capacity not only of grantees but also other funders in the funding community is incredibly important. Talking about what it means to be catalytic is very important, because I think all of the people on the panel here are real role models in how philanthropy ought to be done. And the third thing is really indirect cost funding. There's so much conversation on this. It's been going on for long, but really backing organizations beyond programs, really looking at what it takes to build programs and scale them. It takes money for programs, but it takes a lot of money to build organizations. All of us who've run businesses know that. And somehow we don't translate that to the philanthropy that we do. But when you add this to what you spoke about, which is risk capital, advocacy, long-termness, this sort of formula, I think leads to exponential impact.
Great, thank you very much. I actually won't speak about my own philanthropy because it's very much a work in progress. I'm trying to learn by what I preach, and I recognize that it's tricky. But in my role at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, where I have been for now almost 15 years, I'll speak about the foundation overall and then our work in philanthropy, which I have the privilege of leading. I think Bill and Melinda, very early on, and still even with all the evolutions that they've experienced personally and the foundation has experienced, recognize the incredible, unique role that philanthropy can play if done right in terms of thinking about where it fits vis-a-vis business and where it fits vis-a-vis government. And so they started with the idea that everyone deserves the opportunity to lead a healthy and productive life, and then picked areas that they thought were under-attended to and where there was possibility for great outcomes, but with those great outcomes comes risk. And I think Vidya's point on taking risk means sometimes that you are going to be disappointed with the results, but that's not necessarily failure. Led to engagements across the board in things like global health and development. And one example is the work in polio. The notion that one could actually eradicate a disease off the face of the earth, and this was at a time where prior to the last couple of years, certainly from a Western and particularly American perspective, the idea of global health and diseases that were far away was really not top of mind for anybody. But as the community galvanized around it, they pushed forward this very audacious idea of actually eradicating the disease. And that's taken partnership with industry, pharmaceutical world, business, and hugely government. And it's had its setbacks, but we believe we're on the path to actually making that happen. And so it's an example of really thinking boldly. Now, I know it sounds a bit easier when you've got potentially billions of dollars, but I do think this translates in different ways for givers at all levels, whether they're trying to eradicate polio or make improvements in their community locally. It's going to take partnership with other givers, partnership in coordination with government, and that's where the risk capital that philanthropy can put into the mix can make an enormous difference. I'll just speak about my own personal hat in terms of the work I lead. So I lead this funny team called Philanthropic Partnerships. In addition to all of the work that the Gates Foundation does on health and development and education in the United States, we also play a role in supporting philanthropy. And that can take a number of shapes and forms, but the idea behind all of this is how can we use a combination of three assets. One is the financial assets. Those matter a great deal, and so we invest in a number of different partners, whether it's supporting networks or greater research, data, policy, all of the underpinnings. We use our ideas and we use our voice to try and find ways to inspire donors across the world to actually set bold, audacious goals and then have the resources to meet them. And so when I look across a room like this with so many focused on their giving and how it can have the greatest possible impact, you see the network and catalytic effect, and it's, I think the potential is extraordinary. We still have a ways to go. The challenges that the world has encountered, not just in the last 2 years, but really, for years beyond that, and ones that we will face forward are daunting. And yet, done right, philanthropy's role in driving outcomes, whether it's saving lives, improving lives, preventing calamity in terms of climate and others, it is absolutely vital. And so it's so important and so energizing to be a part of that.
Thank you. And Nicola, I think you've been chairing a task force for the Prime Minister of Australia on this connection between business and philanthropy and community that Rob talked about. Would love to hear from you.
Oh, thank you. And I couldn't agree more than what you both said. I first of all wanted to just say it's so great to be here. Thank you, AVPN, for creating this convening. And Andrew and I started our foundation 21 years ago. And very much similar idea that we wanted every child to have the opportunity to reach their full potential. And that has led to starting off as a grant-making organisation and then very quickly realising that if you really want to change the dial, you need to scale up and you need to work with all your partners, and that includes government, business and philanthropy. And you've just touched on that, Rob. It is so important that all the stakeholders are involved, and it's not about the money. I do believe, and I've always said this, it's not about money, it's about leadership. And most communities have the idea that they know what their answers are, but perhaps they need those capabilities to build that capacity to help them realise their dreams. And I think that's the place for philanthropy. It's the power of convening and advocacy. And what we've done with the maturation of our organisation, so we went from 2 people, Andrew and myself, to now we're over 200. And we are now capitalised at well over $2 billion. And so it's been an extraordinary journey. And yet it's learning from those early days that still speaks to our philanthropy. And most recently, with our government, with disasters that we are seeing, the catalytic nature of philanthropy is that we can 10 times, 20 times our money and get other stakeholders engaged. By bringing different thought leaders together, I think particularly in the world we're facing right now, where we're seeing much more polarisation in society, some of the programs and campaigns that we've led in the last couple of years, I'm going to touch on with the next question, I think. But it has actually resonated with a lot of people because bringing people from different walks of life, from opposite political persuasions, but all realising that we need a long-term vision and what are the things that are going to actually get us through from post-pandemic, what are the recovery, what are the things that we need to do, and having a clear guideline. Our philanthropy was able to bring together those people, and I think that's the power of the catalytic nature.
Wonderful, thank you. And Pak Arshad, you actively sort of wear all three hats today, leading the Indica Foundation, President Director of Indica Corporation, and with your newly elected role in the Chamber of Commerce. Would love to hear your perspectives on this intersection and what the other panelists have said.
Thank you, and I would like to greet everyone here, to welcome to Indonesia and welcome to Bali, and also to all the speakers today. Yeah, first of all, I'm actually the chair of the Indonesian Chamber of Commerce and Industry, which basically all companies, whether state-owned or private or cooperative, are all belonging to Kadin, and all business associations in Indonesia are also belong to Kadin. And basically, first maybe let me speak about a bit about Kadin before I move to what I'm meaning. First of all is in Kadin itself, and which is actually basically what is going on in Indonesia today on this what we call social enterprise movement in Indonesia. So I have been only the chair this is my first year. And this is the first year, and then this is the first time in the Chamber of Commerce we actually introduced and enacted a new department called the social enterprise for the first time. And what we are trying to do is, because when we look back about Indonesia, there is one value in Indonesia, we call it gotong royong. Gotong royong means is collaboration, but more than that is actually giving without thinking of taking something back. And this is actually when we see about social enterprise, we do believe that this is part of our values, which is gotong royong. And it has always been there in our culture and our society. And if there is one lady, famous, we celebrate it every year, we call it April 21st, it's called Ibu R.A. Kartini. She's a lady, was living in Java, in the late during the Dutch colony at that point of time, how she actually do a lot of social thing while actually funding it from the companies that she's doing. And then another thing that is also here is back in 1920s when we have one of the largest Muslim organization called Muhammadiyah, where the establishment of that basically when they established schools, hospitals, but at the same time corporation to take this social enterprise. What I'm trying to say here is that this is something I just want to introduce about what Indonesia and the values of this gotong royong and how this social enterprise today and how today we are pushing for a law in regards to social enterprise, because unfortunately, you know, we have this ideology we call Pancasila. And we believe we are talking about not finance first, not social first in our ideology, but it's actually in the middle, which is social enterprise. But as we have that ideology, but we don't have yet a social enterprise entity. And this is where we are pushing in Indonesia to have this law which enact a new entity which we call social enterprise. Maybe perhaps so I have everybody else to talk about, but I just want to introduce about Indonesia first, because before talking about my foundation, but this is something I would like to share with everyone, at least the beginning of what is this in Indonesia today and the values that we have. Thank you.
Wonderful, thank you. So we've started out at a relatively high level, a little bit theoretical about catalytic philanthropy. Let's make this really tangible for people. Would somebody share a specific example and help us understand sort of the nuance and complexity of what it looks like when you try to really be catalytic with your philanthropy? Nicola, you referenced that you had one to share.
Okay, sure. So we've just had an election in Australia, and we have a new government. And 2 years ago, we started a campaign. Did I hear some applause there? 2 years ago, Thrive by 5, which is one of our initiatives of the Plenary Foundation, started a campaign to bring together all the voices of over 70 organisations, and with the power of leading up to the election of what we were calling for, which was universal, high quality, affordable early childhood system in Australia because it has been lacking, and of course the pandemic. And so we decided to launch this campaign, and then the pandemic struck, and actually out of every setback is the seed for equal or greater opportunity, and it actually showed the cracks completely in the lack of our childcare system in Australia, and early learning and support for families. So, you know, it was the triple damage of women were most desperately affected, children were being not able to go to childcare, and the workforce, the workforce, which is mainly women, were most affected as well. And through the process of bringing together those different voices, we as the philanthropic group provided the secretariat, and to support the campaign we had strategic communication. We engaged with a policy development group in Australia where we had an advisory board which brought together not just experts from science and the care sector, but also government, state and federal representatives, helping to say what would it look like, what is a roadmap. So preparing something prepared earlier to say, well, here's something, it's not working, here's an idea, which was about a guarantee for children. But the really powerful part was we held town halls, and to think that this entire campaign happened over 2 years where people couldn't convene. So, you know, technology again, I think it's a good example of how philanthropy and we can be catalytic and accelerate what we're doing by using technology. So bringing all those voices together, we had a government entrenched in Canberra that I had been, as you referred to earlier, Chris, had been asked to chair and convene a group of a community business partnership. How can philanthropy work better? And the first 1,000 days was one of our key projects, and the other one was social impact investment, which is what you're talking about. And the government just had a dead ear to the early childhood side of things because the answer has always been, it's too expensive, we can't afford to do it. So the other thing that our organisation did was brought in economists and did a model for Australia of what is the cost of late intervention. And so we presented that actually the year before the campaign started. And it was over $15 billion a year in Australia that we are spending on problems, and this is just for children up to the age of 20, and it was pre-COVID and a very conservative figure, I believe. But so we could then pivot the argument to, well, what's the cost of doing nothing? It's costing us $15 billion. And so the argument about early investment and return on investment and calling for long-term. So we got a new government.
Wonderful, thank you. It's interesting to see how many different levers you pulled to advance this campaign over time. Vidya, would love to hear an example from your experience as well.
Actually, there are so many, and you know, when we spoke earlier about really the cocktail that forms catalytic collaboration and partnerships is something that I missed out saying, but I think it's right at the top, along with, you know, funding for advocacy, being long-term, intentionally long-term, as well as, you know, capacity building and so on and so forth. But I think if I look at some of our individual grants, we've done incredible, and even one or two of these ingredients really help in making a grant catalytic. So we've been working, for example, with a school in Calcutta for over 15 years now. And we, you know, with this long-termness, with the capacity building, we've managed to actually not only help that school grow incredibly fast and become a more of a community you know, agent, you know, of change at a broader level, but also enable that school to acquire other schools that were originally owned by the municipal corporation and really build those schools, so to expand its footprint, so much so that it's been voted as one of the world's 10 best schools very, very recently. Or another organization that works on trafficking and really funded some of their advocacy work to enable them to help the government define trafficking, which was originally just limited to sex trafficking, whereas actually the larger portion of trafficking involves labor trafficking. But I think the closest for me in terms of catalytic is the Grow Fund. Some of you may have gone to the session yesterday at the Gates Foundation. I'm very pleased to say they're also a partner there. But really to work with 100 organizations in India and to do it at scale. So it's been designed for scale, brought in a lot of partners, and focused entirely on building capacity and funding the costs of organizations, small and medium-sized grassroots organizations that have been tremendously impacted by COVID, where funding has disappeared and moved entirely to COVID, such that community-based organizations have really suffered. Or even the Udyam Stree campaign, which is a campaign promoting small and medium-sized enterprises by rural women entrepreneurs, and really looking at working with government, working with industry federations such as yours in India, working with state governments, working with businesses, as well as women enterprises themselves and civil society, and working at a campaign level to ensure that all the things that women entrepreneurs need, whether it's networks, capital, support systems, as well as assistance on processes and things, all of that, how do you engender the whole ecosystem to rally towards supporting these organizations? So I think there's so many examples, but these two in particular, we've managed to do it at scale, along with partners, several partners, too many to mention, and sort of also work at a research level so that it's able to sort of catapult the whole effort into a much higher plane. So I think that's what I would like to share here.
Again, so many different examples, but I'll share one that's probably less well known. So when COVID hit in the United States in March of 2020, you probably saw, if you were paying attention, Bill Gates showing up on CNN and in the New York Times and everywhere talking about the various potential solutions in terms of vaccines and therapeutics. And we did a ton of work there, some of which received a lot of coverage, also some misinformation about things that weren't true. But my team looked internally to the community of Seattle because the knock-on effects everywhere were pretty extraordinary in terms of kids being out of school, people being home who normally hadn't been, which led to increases in domestic abuse, all of the risks for homeless populations and so many other areas. And there was a great sense from the community. We have a strong, engaged community that people knew there were problems and knew they wanted to do something. But actually navigating where the areas of greatest need were, who the best implementers were, was daunting. And I think for most it leads to a little bit of paralysis because you want to make sure, whether it's your $50 or $100 or much more than that is going well. So we made a small grant to the Seattle Foundation to give them additional infrastructure support because we knew they had great people, but they don't have a large operating budget. And from that, they were able to create the COVID Response Fund, first for Seattle, and then actually related one across the state. And what this allowed to have happen is because they now had the basic funding for being able to explore different needs in terms of giving, to vet different organizations, to make sure they were looking across the board at which areas had greater needs, and to do measurement and accountability. Other givers were then able to give to this fund. Again, it was many small donations, some medium, some large. And instead of having, some things get overfunded, some neglected, organizations competing with each other, this small investment allowed others to really have the outcomes that we all wanted. And so it's that type of example of sometimes going after the thing, where you're playing a small and invisible role, but that's enabling others to come in and have greater impact that are particularly gratifying.
Pragashad, what elements of these examples resonate with you from your experience? Where would you add to what we've heard?
Yeah, no, because this is what trying to merge when we say the value of Gotong Royong, how we work together and collaborate in Indonesia, and we can see that during this pandemic situation that we had in COVID-19, how the private sectors actually comes together on this, what we call the vaccination programs, and how we actually also created what we call oxygen hospital at that point of time, because we were lack of this. Sorry, just to intend this, but we're trying to see how we work together and to within all the private sectors together, quickly we have to build many oxygen centers during this vaccine. And at the same time, vaccination centers. And how we work with the government in order to do that. With that, the call is that everyone, the foundation all over Indonesia, even all the private sectors together, we come together and unite in actually doing that. And that's one of the ways why I mean, in my opinion, personally, we're very successful in doing a lot of vaccination in Indonesia until what happened today. Because we are now, maybe the first vaccination is more 100%, and second vaccination is more than 80%, and now the third vaccination is already around 30 to 40%. So we are there, and this is how we work together, and the private and the public partnership that you can see, and so quickly. And we have to, one thing is to give the vaccine for free, but how is the process of that, the cost of that? And nobody was thinking about, let's just do it. Everyone was just doing it, every company, in every companies in Indonesia, all over Indonesia, whether it is in the outer side of Indonesia or that. And that's the thing that I say why I started with the values of gotong royong that we can see during this. And that is actually what we see, how everyone is looking at the social impact. And I think, I just want to say on this pandemic situation, it's like God give us a slap on our faces all over, right? Whether it's black, white, green, yellow, whatever religion we are in, we are get that. And this is something I think we shouldn't forget. I just want to remind everyone, because it seems that everyone forget there was a pandemic. Everyone forget there is, nothing happens. Everyone is this. But a lot of things, actually a reminder to do more social impact environmental thing. And that is something I just want to touch on these values because, another value of Indonesia is called the value of unity in diversity. We call it Bhinneka Tunggal Ika. If you see everywhere there is a Garuda, there's a big, and they hold this value of Indonesia called Bhinneka Tunggal Ika, unity in diversity. So we can have all of differences, but at that point of time, and we have to come together. We have to come together. And this is where I think the world has to come together. And particularly we have this G20 coming up. And Kadin is doing the Business 20. And we'd like to also invite if everyone wants to come to this Business 20 because we need to voice out. I said, get all the differences, politics, all this power thing. But what's happening today is about food crisis. And that could create a very big social impact. And this is something that, why are we not talking about this? And this is something I just want to raise here. I know it's not really stating what is related to this. I just want to share that because I think this value of unity and diversity and the value of gotong royong of Indonesia, they would like to say and share this. And, let's have this centered value of unity and diversity. And we need this. And all of us here, I think, as you say, superheroes. And we need more superheroes. And I hope, by this pandemic, there are more superheroes and doing all of the things, not just in this room, but all over. Sorry, I know I'm out of subject. I just want to say out because I'm just, I look at the news and I look at things, it's just like people forget about things. And we need to go back and see what happened. And let's do that more impactful thing. Thank you. Sorry about that.
It's wonderful to hear about the values and so important to think about what undergirds the desire to do all of this, the desire to be superheroes that we feel in the room. And so for each of you on the panel, who are pretty far along on your superhero journeys, I would say, you made this sound easy as you talked about your examples, like it's a piece of cake, you build all these partnerships, drive coalitions forward at national scale, et cetera. But something tells me that perhaps along the way there were some bumps. You talked a little bit about learning in the beginning from mistakes video. Would just love to hear from each of you, what were some of the challenges, or what are some of the challenges to trying to make your philanthropy catalytic? And so we don't leave the audience in despair here, what are some of the things that you can do to actually overcome? What would you recommend to people as they encounter these obstacles to learn from your own experience?
Sure, I'll go first because we've got plenty of mistakes along the way. First, I think it's incredibly important to talk about it. Often, and I spend a lot of times gathered with different philanthropists, people are excited about what's worked. And it's not to boast, it's really because they are so enthusiastic about what's happened and they want to bring others in. But I do think we have to talk about the flip side of where things don't work. So I'll give one example. Again, in the COVID response, in addition to a very smart, small investment we made with the Seattle Foundation, we decided through my team to launch a giving platform to work with partners, both in the US and around the world, to curate giving opportunities for donors who, again, might have been motivated to do something, might have $50 or $100 or other. We built an incredibly beautiful, elegant platform that pulled in opportunities from different organizations like Global Giving, and in the US, a great group called Donors Choose, and through community foundations. It took a while to build. It was beautiful, and nobody used it. We didn't have enough budget to actually promote it. We weren't as thoughtful as possible about how to, and that's a huge understatement, about how to embed it onto other people's sites. And so ultimately, it was a great idea that didn't work. We had a lot of learning from it, and I think at some point it could be recycled down the road, but my report on it is absolute failure. That's okay, because it was the right thing to try and do, and I guarantee that we've learned enough from it that we won't make the same mistakes twice, and there's some learnings that come forward from it. So I think, acknowledge the mistakes, figure out the root cause of those mistakes, and then be resilient and carry forward. The thing that motivated any of us, anybody in this room, to try and do something almost certainly still exists. We all look forward to the day when COVID magically disappears, or other health conditions, or the risk of climate change magically disappears. I don't think that's going to happen. And so go back to the motivation and learn. And I think importantly, learn from others who've traveled that way before. I know this, we talk a lot about collaboration, and it sounds easy. It's not, but actually spending time to learn, to listen, to engage, and then to adapt and overcome is crucial. And that just takes, I think if we talk about our superhero nature or superpower, I think resilience has to be at the top of the list, and curiosity. Those combined with a sense of optimism ultimately will get you to where you need to be.
I couldn't agree more. Collaboration is not easy. And if we all want to make impact, we can't have evaluation as an afterthought. So I would say that, working with partners, you want trust. Partnership is about relationships and trusting each other and having an agreed way forward. But you have to embed that at the beginning. And then that would be a learning for us, that you can't think, here's a great idea, or here's someone that's doing something great and we're going to support them, but not have any agreed outcomes, because then you can't measure success. And with a number of things that we've done, people always say, if you can't measure it, then it doesn't really exist. So having evidence and research behind everything that you do actually helps drive. Data is king. So it's about people, and I love what you said. I think we are at an inflection point. I really do, that collaboration and scale is really important at this time. And COVID has shown us how connected we actually all really are. And let's not wait for the next disaster to continue to do that. The problems that I talked about in Australia and have affected people around the world. And, I've been on the road for 5 weeks actually, and it's been quite a fascinating time to be in Europe with the Ukraine war, the food shortages that you're talking about. We're about to face some other major dramas. And so what I would say is we can't pivot from one crisis to the next. We have to continue to be focused on the areas where we know we need systemic change. And for systemic change to happen, we need to partner with government and business, because no matter how many billions, and Gates are amazing, and we have partnered with you also, and wonderful partners, no matter how much we have as philanthropists, it is nothing like the budgets government have or the capital that businesses can deploy, and that's how we get systemic change, by working with them.
I think so many good points that both Rob and Nicholas really spoke about. I think what I'd like to add is actually about listening. It's about, how as funders, we've always been told we should listen to our grantees, and that we obviously have to do, because otherwise we'll probably be doing the wrong things with the communities that we most intend to serve. But I think we don't even listen to each other. We don't get together with each other because we're so afraid that we'll be asked for something. And I mean, I've learned a lot from the field. I go very regularly into the field. But I think I've learned equally from partners, you know, like Rob at Gates, and I've just gotten to know Nicola, and so much that we can learn from each other. In fact, in India, we are partnering with Britspan on an initiative called Pay What It Takes, where we're trying to really look at what do we tell funders about what it actually takes to drive impact at scale. And one of the findings was amazing, that we fund such few organizations that are led by women, that are led by Dalits, tribals, and the most marginalized communities. And that data, when it was thrown at us, we actually were so taken aback because we all feel we're doing work for the most marginalized. But when you actually look at who leads these organizations, there were very few that were being led by these communities. And also that the fact that we just don't fund what it takes to drive a scale. And when the data is shown that you actually need about 11% at least 11% plus to fund just organizations being built, and actually much higher when the organizations are smaller, something like 11 to 20%. The actual funding is less than 5% of what to fund organizations. So when you get together with other people who want to fund intentionally long-term catalytic philanthropy, you actually learn from each other. And so listening to each other in the funding community, learning from each other from the funding community, is as important as learning from and listening to your grantees.
Thank you. Any final thoughts, Prakash?
Yeah, I just want to share with you, one of the things that's one of our agenda in G20 and B20 where we're aligning, that we're pushing is about energy transition. And another one is about blended finance. This is the part that I agree with you that we need to have really a public-private partnership clearly, right? To you know, as an example in this energy transition. So what we are trying to do is also trying to be different in this G20 and B20. Our president is a man of action. He said, let's not just talk about policy. Let's take action. And this is the part that we are trying to do. Not just have discussion on policy recommendation on the B20 and G20, but moving forward to create legacies and projects. And in every project we have, we want to make sure that it is a ESG values to that. Okay. Then furthermore is, let's create a project of this, let's say, energy transition. So we are doing right now is how, for example, retirement of the coal-fired power plant in Indonesia. We're going to do a project, we're not just going to talk and say, we'll put it there. Let's create a blended finance for it, whereby the public and private partnership, philanthropy monies, and also from the government, and also from the private sectors, how to make this happen, as an example. Another example that we're doing on this blended finance is for the farmers. We are doing a pilot right now. What we're saying is, how can we help the farmers? How to reduce the costs for them? How to make sure that we cannot just give them, because we need to make sure that they are entrepreneurs, but at the same time, how to make sure that what we call here in Indonesia is called how we actually, the big companies or and then philanthropies together working on the farmers, how to make improvement of these farmers to make sure that he will be lifted up from this poverty. And that's, again, I think it leads the word collaboration. And that's why I say gotong royong in Bahasa. But let's not just say the word collaboration, because if too many superheroes and we fight of many ideas, but at the end of the day, sometimes we forget the original ideas of what to help, and let's help the people that's needed, or what kind of social impact and environmental impact we can do. Perhaps maybe that's what I want to say. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So a couple of key takeaways in closing that we heard. One is that, you know, it's important in doing this catalytic philanthropy that you pull a variety of levers. We heard advocacy, data, making data available, pulling together different groups, research, etc. The importance of learning and listening, because no one has all of the answers, and you're going to make some mistakes along the way. The deep importance of partnerships and collaboration, it's really the only way to do any of this at scale. Being committed for the long term, being resilient so that when you have those lessons, you actually bounce back. And to really talk about what some of the challenges are, what some of the mistakes are with your peers, with others that you're working with. So hopefully you come away from this with a better sense of what catalytic philanthropy really looks like, that it can be a really powerful lever, and would just ask that whatever role you are in, whether that's at a philanthropy or doing CSR work or impact investing, leading an NGO, is just to take a moment right now and reflect on what you heard here and send yourself a quick note via email that you can refer back later when you're sitting down about one shift that you would like to take in your own work to create an even more catalytic future for the cause, the issues that you really care about. Thank you so much, everybody. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you very much to this panel. What a wonderful discussion. And thank you, Chris, for those last thoughts that we should take with us and how we can shift. I would like to also take a moment to acknowledge our guests that are online and also wish them a warm welcome. Us, we're here in person, but we've got quite a number of our colleagues and peers online as well. So the next plenary will be focused on the sustainability agenda, a catalyst for growth. I'm especially interested and passionate about the word sustainability, so I hope you will be as engaged and interested in the next panel. One of the areas is COVID-19 has definitely highlighted gaps in many areas, but also in the same ways has also accelerated the discussion and engagement around sustainability. The speakers will be talking about the long-term value for a broad set of stakeholders across the region. And I welcome to the stage Ms. Veronica Collindom, founder and CEO of YCAB Foundation. Mr. En Lee, Managing Director, Head of Sustainable and Impact Investments in Asia at LGT. And Mr. Eduardo Colavecchio, Managing Director at the Oppenheimer Generations Asia.
Good morning, everyone. I think welcome to the most sartorially choreographed panel I think you're going to see this week. So just to explain the little catwalk we just did, I think just a huge thank you to Vera and the YCAB Foundation. So these are all produced by her, her beneficiaries.
Yeah.
And maybe you can share a little bit about that.
Yeah. We just had an idea like Friday night. And thought, hey, it would be good to have this coordinated, batik presented on the stage. and these guys picked their selections, which is great.
We picked the same, very similar.
And then we didn't realize we actually came out coordinated like this. So this is done by our students from the batik making class. It's preserving of culture, but also one of the vocational skills that I totally love, because it's not only educating them to get jobs, but to create jobs. And that's amazing, simply because making batik, it takes at least 5-6 people because of that whole process. So this one particularly created by Rizal, this is a 2016 class, now has, I guess, 36 people working for him. And look at this. They're just brilliant.
No, that's great. And it ties into what we're going to talk about later as well. So I think, thank you so much. I mean, it's like wearing a painting, as you're saying. It's fantastic. So I think, we had some brief intros, but just to recap, obviously Vera, chairperson of AVPN, founder and CEO of YCAB, and one of Indonesia's leading philanthropists, having impacted millions of women through financial inclusion, economic empowerment, and education. So we'll hear more on that. And Lee, head of sustainability and impact investment for LGT in Asia, as well as advisor and founding partner of LGT's private equity impact arm, Lightrock. So, esteemed panel over here. I should also send the apologies of Jonathan, my boss, who was meant to be here with us today. Unfortunately, couldn't travel at short notice, but sends his regrets and really wanted to be with us. I think, what's interesting about this, and let me get into the questions, but I think as we were talking, some commonalities here is obviously we all work in emerging markets and have worked in emerging markets from Africa to Asia, which is what brings us together in some way. But also, we are all affiliated in some way to a family-owned family office, family foundation, family-owned enterprise. And I think this also shapes how people think and can align about themes like philanthropy, like impact investment. So in terms of starting up top on philosophy, right, if you in your role as practitioners in this environment, I mean, what role do things like intentionality and additionality play in your own thinking? And I'll start with you on that one.
Sure.
Yeah.
Thanks, Eduardo. And it's great to see everyone here. I'm really, really delighted to see so many friends, colleagues, and partners here. And thank you to AVPN for convening us, and Vera for the lovely batik shirts. So I think just some context, I'm privileged to work for a family with a unique legacy of 900 years. Almost across 30 generations. And I think that's where I like to start, because when we're talking about sustainability, we're really talking about the doing and thinking and operating today what we know will thrive for future generations, right? So it's always looking to the future. And when we're talking about catalyzing growth, we're talking about finding effective and scalable solutions. Okay? And I think really against that context, it's so important now that we think about things like intentionality. Because when you look at venture philanthropy or impact investing, it's defined by that intention. And how you assess that intention flowing from the funder to the organizations, to the beneficiaries or stakeholders is really, really important. And particularly now more than ever, there are a lot of claims of impact washing, greenwashing, rainbow washing, right? So intentionality is one way that one assesses that authenticity behind the business model. The other thing, Eduardo, I think that's really important is additionality, right? Because as funders, whatever intervention you're funding, you need to ask yourself, what do I add as a funder, in addition to what the organization will do? And these two things, I think, are extremely important.
Thank you.
Yeah, I guess in our case, I totally agree. Intentionality, additionality, and then that speaks a lot about the alignment of mission and vision and all of that among us and the stakeholder. I mean, we found ourselves quite unique because we began with philanthropy, pure philanthropy, which is in Indonesia is under foundation. And then I found myself 23 years later doing more on the venture side of it. I mean, I didn't choose to be like this, but in Indonesia, there's regulations that kind of really distinctively differentiate non-profit and for-profit. But we're a social enterprise, and we cannot just do all what we want to do, our mission, under one roof. So you just kind of work around it, and then in our case, the education was the beginning of YCAB, and we keep running it under the foundation, whereas the economic empowerment, financial inclusion, it has to be regulated because it's a microfinance with the enabling education mission in it. So it's like a little bit twist than a bit tweak from the normal microfinance. That's what we kind of want to do, and we have to do it under the venture structure. Then later on, because it's a part of the regulation, 15% of the business has to be empowering other organizations like the small, medium enterprises. So we are all impact people, impact company, we want to also go and help impactful companies. So then we were dragged into, I guess, impact investing, because that's just part of the regulation we have to do. But I guess I found myself in the whole continuum of capital, from philanthropy to ventures to impact investment. And that's, I think it's just natural growth. I guess every country is different, and this is just how we navigate our journey to create that impact. So that is a lot of intention. You have to really think and really put in the heart, like, how can I navigate? And then always the question of additionality is always comes when we work with partners, with investors, with givers. What is it that we both, all of us, put on the table? Because we can't just redundantly do something similar. It's boring. But we need challenge. We want to create at scale, and that's always the big question. But if I could add another one, not only intention, what is also the integrity of impact, which is additionality, that's important, and also inspiration, because at the end of the day, we want to inspire people to do it better and stronger and faster than us. There's no competition in that sense. Yeah.
Oh, and thank you both. I think this is great points. It ultimately points to the fact that it's ultimately a continuum, right? So you kind of, it's hard to align or whatever. You think about it as a philosophy, and you apply that throughout what you do across the board. I think from our perspective, what's interesting is taking an traditional investment hat and building it backwards, right? So the family is being operators over several generations. What Jonathan would probably talk about today is his philosophy of engaged capital. So how do financial investors and company managers come together and, with a shared purpose for long-term sustainable value? So you talk about time horizon and how, and I think that ties into, you need tolerance of risk tolerance, you need patience, you need scale for these things. So ultimately, your intentionality comes in the sense of purpose that you have in entering into an investment or an impact investment or a philanthropic venture. But then the additionality comes into, that value add you add as an operator in a way, or as a investor in that sense. So how can you help build that forward? But I think, just tapping on what you just said, I think obviously we've seen the emergence, and we've talked about this week as well, right? But the rise of venture philanthropy, and specifically that, how does that play into your thinking? Obviously you manage a lot of different, entities yourselves. So maybe with you, Vera, this time, so to flip it around. Yeah.
Okay. The venture philanthropy role I guess the things that, few things, right? We were not thinking in the space of ventures at the beginning, but now we are in that mode. There's a lot of things to learn for me personally, because it's not something that natural, although I'm actually from the capital market background, but it's to kind of create the two together to put impact and business. It's not natural. So that's a lot of things that I have to learn myself. And the piece on the venture philanthropy is really an ideal space to find ourselves in from the whole journey that I spoke about earlier on. But you're referring to examples of
we could get to example a bit, but I'm just thinking about venture philanthropy versus impact versus, and I think you were interested to hear your views, obviously, and you sit on a few different entities, right? So.
Yeah, so I think I love to use the AVPN term, the continuum of capital, right? Because that's what we're playing with when we're trying to solve challenges at scale. And I think with venture philanthropy, maybe just to define it for everyone in the room, I think the commonality is that we're talking about an active funding strategy when we're applying sort of venture capital or early stage investment principles applied to philanthropic outcomes, right? So, and obviously impact investing is really a complement to that, because we're looking at investment approaches that drive these measurable social and environmental outcomes as well. And at least for LGT, we use that in a complementary fashion. We believe that they are mutually reinforcing. And what we mean by that is since 2007, almost 1.5 decades ago, when we set up LGT Venture Philanthropy, which really started from grant-based approaches, right? But at the same time, in the last couple of years, we've been very active in impact investing, because we found that there's a certain segment of those solutions that could be commercialized at scale. And therefore, we could bring in investment capital to work. So I think, to your question, Eduardo, I think we see it as, given the scale of the challenges, given the complexity of the challenges, whether it's from healthcare, education, agriculture, financial inclusion, and so forth, we see there's a very important opportunity where you can pair venture philanthropy with impact investing, right? And in some countries like Indonesia, in certain sectors, like the stuff that Vera's doing, they're quite early stage, and therefore the venture philanthropy has a very key role to de-risk some of these business models so that commercial investors can then come in and then take it to scale, hopefully regionally and globally.
Well, thank you. I mean, that's super interesting. I think just to add on a thought is obviously think about it as a toolkit, you know, depending on, and you kind of deploy different tools depending on the problems you're facing,
I think
right?
tools is it's just a vehicle. What is it that because at every organization or companies or programs, so to speak, you know, you kind of need to know the characteristics of it and what is it that we should apply, you know, to make it work. Some actually need investment, some probably won't, because a lot of Indonesian great ideas, but they're not investable yet. Not even investable at scale. So we have to work, and then patience. You use the word patience, it's a long track. But if your mindset is already there, you know that you need to approach this philanthropically, then any financial gain would be a bonus. I mean, good to have that instead of you start with the impact investing and at the end of the day you're disappointed because you know you're not making, the business is not scaling, and that sort of, and your money is pretty much gone. So that's pretty much, I think I would set myself in this space rather than just go jumping there, but depends on, of course, the partners that we collaborate with.
Partnership is key, and I think, you know, if you think of it as tools, right, is what do you use to unlock a different challenge? So also trying to arbitrage and think ideas between regions. So I think how we think about it as a family office, right, is obviously we have deep roots in Africa. That's always going to be a focus of what we do, right? But we tend to do more of our venture philanthropy work through our foundation in Africa, and that's more like thinking about tipping points and catalyzing these solutions and for long-term change and being that first risk capital, all the way through to more venture capital, pure venture capital investment, which we might make, you know, for example, out of Singapore through our team there, which is more commercial. But again, you're by investing in startups that solve real problems in society, also you are playing a different kind of impact. So we kind of like to across the board. But I think the geographical angle is also important because you can focus on different problems depending where you are.
And not just geographically, but I think what happened during the pandemic, it was a crisis that led us into thinking and rethinking the strategy and to kind of really know what we actually want to do, what kind of organization, what kind of people that we are serving. You know, it's just about the fun that out of, maybe the fun part out of the pandemic, we kind of have that clarity. Clarity is important. I mean, in everything that we do, we have that clarity in the post-pandemic that we cannot serve a certain number or kind of, you know, bottom of the pyramid. I mean, those we experience in a way that, number one, we move everything online, and that is working for the education component, but the economic empowerment, the financial inclusion, 47% of our portfolio is gone, you know, because they went back to the villages and we just lost touch. So the company suffers, the foundation actually on the rise, and we quadrupled our program, we scale really quickly, and we kind of know what's the best thing to do in terms of education, the vocational skill that we need to maintain, which came down to just two. You know, we closed our other schools, learning schools, because it's expensive, and then we know it was expensive, but it was before because it's a lockdown. But then we kind of, so it came back to do the batik making class. It's just still going on during the pandemic. It's very resilient because it's a small group of making it. And the second one is actually the STEM education, coding. Now, on that note, is what is interesting, one of our investees providing the education, the coding training, and we went from like maybe few thousands in a year. We went to 250,000, you know, to educate people, go online on the STEM. And what we like on this coding program, not that they create jobs, they get jobs, but they get jobs at least 2 or 3 times of the minimum wage in Indonesia. So that works. The pandemic crisis really put us in the position to know what we need to do, what we can do, and who we should serve.
Yeah, so I think that, you know, I mean, we need to make it real also for the audience. I think we start obviously with, so in terms of like, you know, those are some great examples, right? But obviously, we're all practitioners in the space, and we see a lot of emerging markets. So I think, you know, just good to share a few more examples, I think, on this in terms of to make it a bit more tangible. And I think, you know, especially how solutions have scaled over time, and you've seen that work effectively long term. So maybe I don't know, health and energy, some topics that you're familiar with.
No, sure. I really like to contextualize some of these concepts to what we see on the ground. So I think obviously these key sectors we've talked about, but if I focus maybe on health and maybe energy. So with healthcare, I think, you know, ultimately we're trying to create, you know, enduring systemic solutions. That's what we're always trying to do. And in the case of healthcare, what are we trying to do? The objective is obviously trying to give access, affordability, and quality of healthcare solutions. And obviously in emerging markets, a lot of that is driven by technology because it's scale. And so we have invested in a range of things, from the business models that includes low-cost clinics and hospitals, all the way to mHealth solutions. And I think it's really the mHealth solutions that we find particularly interesting because technology democratizes the access to these essential goods and services. So maybe to cite an example from India, we've invested in one of the largest online pharmaceutical platforms that gives access to medicines and drugs, all the way to, you know, mHealth solutions. In the case of our venture philanthropy portfolio, trying to help pregnant mothers, you know, increase the livelihood of pregnancies, and particularly tackling with maternal and child health, again driven by technology. That's on our venture philanthropy side. So I think there's a lot of potential there. And if you take a country like Indonesia, 260 million population, very, very high mobile penetration, extremely attractive demographics, young populations, and 17,000 fragmented islands, right? Those are the kinds of solutions we think we can scale, right? And not to mention the cultural differences. So the other one in terms of energy, and I use this example because I know Oppenheimer foundations are very active in Africa. And I think, you know, ironically, sometimes, although we're sitting in Southeast Asia and Indonesia, actually the demographic drivers, the macro trends, are actually very similar when you look at Africa and Southeast Asia, and in fact, most of Asia, actually, right? And, you know, when it comes to energy access, like I mentioned, Indonesia, 17,000 islands. Think about energy access there with agrarian-driven communities. If you look at Philippines, 7,000 islands, right? Many people that are energy poor. So very, very similar situation to sub-Saharan Africa, where we seeded a company and grew it called Mcopa, which is one of the largest pay-as-you-go solar home systems. Essentially what they do is they target a very low-income population market, people below $2 a day. And essentially they pay an initial deposit, and they use mobile credits of 50 cents, which is actually the same price they would otherwise pay for kerosene. And they use their mobile credits to get solar access. After about 1 or 1.5 years, they own the solar home system. So it's a pretty interesting model. And obviously, you know, 12 years ago when we seeded them, we never thought that this model could scale. And today, it powers over 1 million homes in Kenya, Uganda, and Tanzania. Okay, so that's one example of something that really democratizes energy access. And the reason why I cite it as an example is because that company was first seeded and incubated out of our venture philanthropy, where we actually de-risked the model through several iterations. And finally, when they were successful and they could scale commercially, that's when we brought in impact investment capital. And that's really the example that I'm trying to use to say that these tools in the toolkit are complementary for an amplified outcome.
Oh, that's fascinating, thank you. And I mean, I think you started a little bit to talk about some of the work you've done, but I don't know if you wanted to build on that.
No, I find the commonality between all of us, we actually work in the spectrum, the whole spectrum, right? Your family, from foundations to impact. And I think that's, at the end of the day, it's just tools. And we just need to know what to use, you know, when. And we don't get yet that experience to, to bring a company to impact, to scale like that. But we are on the way because we're just starting this whole venture and the impact investing about four years ago with the right structure. But I think what's the important piece, at least the one learning, if I could share, is that one, we need to take the risk. In Indonesia, with the condition of the laws that is not too friendly towards a non-profit, because this is the post-Suharto era where they kind of try to tone down everything that has to do with a non-profit. So we just have to navigate. You have to take a risk. And the asset of a non-profit, in a way, belongs to the state. That's in the regulation. So for us to have the foundation to own the ventures, it's a big risk because the whole asset can be, although in the history of Indonesia, probably 2 times it actually happened. There was a case when the government confiscated the foundation's asset, but that's another story. But it took time for us to really wanted to take that risk. But that's, at the same time, we have faith working with the policy because we need to change that particular law and at the same time introducing the social enterprise, all this venture impact kind of space. So it was a long journey, 5 years, and we didn't get it as a law yet, but it's already in the presidential decree. What the use of it? Really the question. For us, it's easier to us to speak to the government, to in a way educate them about impact, about social enterprise and all of that, if we have something to really tie it with, it's a matter of category, it's a matter of terminology that we need to help them understand because it takes a long time in that sense, in our experience, but it's critical. It's important to really have that going.
Actually, it's a really great segue because, okay, you're a family institution, you have the capital, you have the intentionality, you have the target beneficiaries, but, obviously you don't operate in a vacuum. So how do you scale that solution? How do you work with partners across the board to enhance it? How do you think about the role of government? How do you think about the role of the policy and regulatory frameworks? I guess if we think about, obviously there's a lot of examples globally, but if we think about emerging markets, it's also interesting to think about how you can pull together these partnerships. You talked about partnerships before. Across the board, families, government, foundations, and how you can actually then reach that tipping point. From our perspective, giving a bit of an African angle, so, in the aftermath of the pandemic, dealing in South Africa, obviously you don't have the same firepower that the government just doesn't have the same firepower that the US or Europe or Singapore would have, to provide quantitative easing. So what do you do, right? So in that situation, the government provided a setup and a few families did their own pools, but effectively it was private donors came in as that sort of let's mobilize quick action and response to framework to help people in the immediate aftermath. And I think from our perspective, there was a South Africa Future Trust that was set up by the family, endowed with $60 million approximately, and that was all about relief, short-term relief to employees of SMEs. And the idea there is you're providing type of minimum wage type amounts, but you're giving them quickly, you're giving them straight away, and it's funded through basically the company takes an interest-free loan from the trust, but the money goes to employees, and in an environment, again, EM, for every employee, there's a dependency ratio of 4 to 5 people. So you're helping one employee, you're actually helping 5 people with every one of those. And actually, in South Africa, it's not a question about staying at home or not. It's actually, am I going to be on the bread lines? Am I going to starve if I don't get? So it's because you don't have that safety net. So in the end, that was a very successful program. It helped 10,000 companies, circa 100,000 beneficiaries. And it was deployed within a couple of weeks. But that required government to grant the organization PBO status. That required a few partner banks to help us facilitate the distributions and to come together and open up their loan books that we could actually. So I think at that point you couldn't have done it alone. And even then, though, that was the thing. No one expected then the pandemic to last 2 years. So then the conversation that's happening now is how do you scale that long-term impact, and how do you get that over time to go beyond just a couple of years. So we're thinking about it, how the money comes back and we can reinvest into South Africa's future through the foundation, because the money never comes back to the family, it stays within the trust. So that's one area of how you can kind of recycle the capital over and over. But the realization there is obviously you can never do anything alone. And just love to get your views on that as well. Yeah.
No, I think that's really a great example. Thanks for sharing. I read about that as well. We came up also with a COVID emergency funding facility, and I think I'm trying to highlight something that Vera said, that philanthropy has really, really powerful advantages of speed and flexibility, right? The ability to provide unrestricted, quick and flexible funding is really, really key to the sector. So that's why I'm saying that it's a very, very powerful tool in the toolkit, particularly given the context. I think on the second question about how do we collaborate, and I think quite often we talk about the 3 Ps, right? The public, the private, and philanthropic capital, right? How do we amplify and work together? And I go back to what I said earlier, that we're ultimately trying to address enduring systemic change. And these changes are hard to do without doing it with the government, right? Because the role of enabling infrastructure and policy are hand in hand, and they become complements for private funders, philanthropically or investments, to come in. And I think that's something that we don't do enough of. And I'm really glad that obviously conveners like AVPN bring all these multi-sector and multi-stakeholders together so we can have that conversation and have that discussion. And I really like a quote that was said yesterday, that in Asia, we only move at the speed of trust. And I really, really like that, because compared to most of my time spent in the Western countries where a lot of things were transactional, here, I encourage everyone to start first forming relationships of trust, because once that is you can build many things together, also with governments. And the second point I think I want to allude to is, while we're talking about sectors, poverty is a multifaceted beast. The same families that don't have energy access, like the ones I talked about, don't have access to water, sanitation, healthcare, education, and so forth. So when we're thinking about solution, one really needs to challenge yourself, even though sectorially you might start with energy or education or financial inclusion in various cases, but you have to move to multi-sectoral solutions. And that's another reason why we need to collaborate and get that collective impact.
Yeah, it's the whole journey, I guess, and multi-sectoral. In our case of the whole journey, it was education. We began with education, but we can't solve the education problem of the poor, the dropout rates and all of that, just by giving free school. The school may be free, but going to school is never free. So then we thought about the education, the economic empowerment, the financial inclusion piece into that brings the complication of structure. So yeah, so that's the whole thing. So I like the multi-sectoral approach to impact, but it has to be integrated in such a way that it actually matters, because it's, at the end of the day, it's not us doing something amazing to be down in the statistic, but it's down to the life of one person, one family at a time. And that is, I think, the power. You probably don't see it in the millions of data or numbers you can claim, but you can see in one person, like Rizal, who made this batik, right? He was, well, we taught the skill of batik with I think digital marketing piece to it, because we believe they have to engage in a way, some kind of technology to sell directly to the market. So Rizal was quite resistant to technology, still wanting to create batik and sell it in the traditional channel. But then in Indonesia, the artist will probably make 10% of the value or the price of batik sold, right? So then it took him probably 5 years, and over a pandemic, a crisis again, to then open up to sell through the Facebook, Instagram, and WhatsApp channel. And then he now employed a lot of 30 plus people, and then he's like really, I guess, successful in his standard. But then that is the life that we touch, and he's touching multiple. Like if it's investment, probably 30x, 35x, not bad. You know, people who get that inspiration from him. So that piece, intentionality, additionality with inspiration. So the three piece of I think that should come along in impactful program. Yeah.
Oh, interesting. So I mean, I think in the last few minutes we have, I guess, just a quick take. I think, obviously, you mentioned a few times the pandemic. I think, obviously, crisis can also be an opportunity, right? To think differently, and as you said, from Rizal to many others. So, how? I mean, just brief reflection from you both. I mean, how do you see in your environments, in your markets, how has impact investment transition, or is adapting, or will adapt to the aftermath of the pandemic? And what are you seeing?
Yeah. So I'm happy to start. So, I obviously think that I'm very, very optimistic for Asia as a place for impact investing. Obviously not given there's the context, but the fact that, we have the massive accumulation of wealth, but at the same time intersected with the greatest developmental challenges in the same place, right? And it was really interesting because when Vera sent us the batik shirts yesterday, and I love mine, right? I read the card that said that batik actually comes from the tik, is a Javanese word that dots. So, given that fact that we come from such a heterogeneous and such a diverse market like Asia, the opportunity is in joining the dots to create things as beautiful as batik, right? So I honestly feel that, the opportunity is really in Asia, so I'm actually very optimistic for that. But the opportunity for all of us here today is really trying to think about how we join the dots across sectors, across solutions, across markets, because what I have found and be very humbled by is we're more similar than we think we are, right? We're more similar than we think we are. And so therefore, if that's the case, we have the ability to connect and combine solutions so much more effectively if we only took time to make that connection, to join the dots.
I really like the joining the dots because it's important. We don't operate in silos. Because in Indonesia, I mean, working, again, the tri-sector, the 3 Ps, always, there's no trust, but it's a little bit careful, way careful. So in a sense towards, like the government, not in my experience, would sort of like help organization or foundations to kind of, to be resilient or to face the pandemic, for example. We don't see that, but we see that from a different perspective. I also wear a hat as the, what do you call that, the supervisory board or the commissioner of Indonesia's largest microfinance, the state-owned company. It's a totally different treatment. We are very jealous with that because during the pandemic, a lot of bad debts, they came in cash. So again, philanthropic plays a big role, and we're looking at 12 million, active customer was sort of like saved from the whole pandemic because they have billions and trillions of money just poured into that. And that's the whole thing. I guess if I could say anything with this, it's just the whole continuum. You just have to play your card right in what kind of situation to what kind of agenda that you want to really strengthen. So impact investing has its role. In Indonesia, a lot of impact. But again, ventures, the normal ventures company start talking about impact because it's just trending. But I hope it's not because it's trending, because they want to see. Because in the 10 years, maybe, I hope not too long, but I want to say 20, but maybe 5 or 10 years, any investment should be impactful. Yeah. That's what I see the world. So we're forever optimists. We want to create that world, but it needs like kind of transparency. That's what it is, the impact measurement piece, and also from the impact investing piece, it has to have that both accounts to be transparent. So that's what I think going forward in order for this sector to really grow and create a sustainable change. Yeah.
No, thank you. So I think, there you have it. I think, to sum it up, I'd say, really fascinating conversation. Thank you both. I think definitely the themes of start with intentionality in how you approach it. That's your purpose. That's your North Star. Think about partnerships and how, who you go on that journey with as well. And then join the dots, make sure that you see the patterns, make sure you can, because that's how you get the additionality, that's how you get the scale over time. But thank you both so much. It's been a really fun conversation. Thank you, everyone. And I think it's your tea break now, so really soon. Thank you.
Thank you very much to the three speakers, so two speakers and moderator speaker, and for their fashion sense, I must say. Where can we all look like you three? So thank you all for your participation this morning. I have 3 points before I send you off. I welcome you all to grab tea and coffee at level 2 and go straight to your sessions. We will be starting on time at 11:15. I also then welcome you back here for the afternoon plenary at 4:45 p.m. Be here. And lastly, one last quote to carry with you. We all have the capacity to be a superhero. In order to become one, you just have to find your unique power or ability and exploit it for the greater good. The cape and mask are optional accessories, but a kind heart is essential. So thank you for this morning, and thank you for your kind hearts.
Thank you.